welcome to another episode of Surgeons' Lives. I'm your host, John Monson. My guest today is Matt Weiss, who is Deputy Physician-in-Chief and Director of the Surgical Oncology Program at Northwell Cancer Institute. Matt is an internationally recognized surgical oncologist with a special interest in pancreatic cancer. In a fascinating discussion today, he goes over his life story, which started in Philadelphia and then followed a very traditional academic pathway, culminating in a long period of faculty appointment at Hopkins under the mentorship of John Cameron. He then jumped ship, if you like, from a traditional academic model and joined Northwell Health, which is the largest provider of healthcare in New York State. He still dreams about becoming a chair of surgery one day and talks about how he struggled with making that decision to change direction. If you like this conversation, then please don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and send whatever comments you have for me to hear. If you prefer listening rather than watching, you can hear this fascinating discussion on all your favorite podcast channels. Without further ado, therefore, let's go over and listen and talk to Dr. Matt Weiss. I'm John Monson, and this is Surgeons' Lives. Hey, Matt.
Dr. Munson,
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. You had a busy clinic day, I believe?
Very busy. Very busy. I was away last week and I came back and I operated 3 days this week, and I saw some new patients on Monday and on Tuesday, and then my normal clinic is Friday. And today was just swamped. But I got through it and it's 4:30, so we're good.
It's the penance you pay for going away.
I sometimes wonder whether it's worth it. I think it's worth it. I think it is worth it, but sometimes you come back and you're just so behind. I mean, you know how it is. You come back and I check my emails and I do a little bit of work, but a lot of the things you just can't act on while you're on vacation.
Sure.
While I was away, I had two universities reach out to write, professorship letters of endorsement. And those take a lot of time. It's not something you can just do in 20 minutes. They take, 3-4 hours to put those together.
No, for sure. Well, thank you anyway for spending some time at the end of your day to join this episode of Surgeons' Lives, which, as you know, also has a subtitle of Stuff That Matters, which I like to think is a little different to just the CV and all of that sort of stuff, but really just for everyone's benefit. I always ask people to start us off by a little bit of a potted history of life and career, starting with the words I was born in.
Sure. Now I'll give you a little bit of background. So I was born and grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I grew up kind of just outside of the city, just outside of Northeast Philadelphia. My father was owned a real estate business, still owns a real estate business. He was the third generation of the Weiss realtors at both a real estate sales and as well as a management company. And no one in my family was in medicine. My mother had some jobs, actually worked at a hospital doing fundraising for our local hospital, Abington Hospital, which is now part of Jefferson Health System in Philadelphia. But no one in my family was in medicine. I had a godfather that was a neurosurgeon that I was very close with, who actually recently passed away. But he was probably my only real, experience with the medical field. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, but from the youngest age, I always wanted to be a doctor. And people ask me all the time why, and truthfully, I don't know why. I think medicine to me had the unique aspect that it was a job and a career, but your career was about helping people. Just in my heart of hearts, I always loved the idea that what I did for a living was helping. people. It's that simple for me. And truthfully, I always saw medicine as a somewhat financially stable profession. I mean, I don't think you go into medicine because you're looking to get rich. If you want to do that, maybe you should go to Wall Street or, but I thought that it was a respected career. It was a financially stable career, and as an added bonus, as my mentor John Cameron used to say, if you pick a job that you love, it's never really a job. It's you're not going to work every day if you like what you're doing. So I pretty much early on, it's a roundabout way of me saying I kind of knew I wanted to go in medicine. I did a lot of things in high school. I shadowed doctors. I went to College of the Holy Cross. I went to a small high school called Chestnut Hill Academy in Philadelphia. And from there, I went to College of the Holy Cross, where several doctors that I began to know growing up had attended school. I actually only applied to two colleges. I applied to Holy Cross and I applied to Penn State. And I was accepted to Penn State, but I decided I was going to go to Holy Cross because these doctors I knew had attended there. Had a great experience there. I was pre-med. I was actually a math major at Holy Cross. Graduated from Holy Cross and took a job doing research at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia back
Right.
home. I knew I was going to apply to medical school, but I took a year off and I worked in an amazing lab at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, studying pediatric neuroblastoma, the most common extracranial solid tumor of children. And I was doing a project at the time that was studying familial neuroblastoma. And in those days, we were doing linkage analysis. We were trying to find the gene that causes familial neuroblastoma. And remember, this is prior to the Human Genome Project.
Yep.
Human Genome Project, as you recall, took 11 years, cost, I don't know, $1 billion. And now, today, we can sequence a tumor in an afternoon. We can
Yeah.
sequence your entire human genome in an afternoon, and it costs about $800 or $1,000. But back then, you had whole days of running PCR and running gels. But to make a long story short, at the end of that project, I ended up continuing that through medical school. We had actually identified the gene that causes familial neuroblastoma. So that got me super excited and into the genetics of cancer and cancer in general. Um, I went to medical school at Jefferson Medical College, which was just an absolutely amazing clinical training, I believe, which really prepared me well. I left Jefferson and I did a sub internship at Johns Hopkins on Keith Lilimo's service.
Hmm.
But as part of that, I worked with Keith Lilimo. I worked with Charlie Yo. I worked with Mark Talamini and John Cameron. And I was fortunate enough that then I was selected to do the residency at Hopkins. I did my general surgery training at Hopkins. I left and did 2 years of immunology research with David Sachs and Jordan Madsen at the MGH. During those 2 years, I was lucky enough to meet my wife. We got engaged while I was in, actually, yeah, we got engaged while I was in Boston. We then returned to Baltimore, finished my surgical residency. I did my fellowship as a combined surgical oncology hepatobiliary fellowship at Sloan Kettering in
Yeah.
New York. From there, I was hired back at Hopkins, and I was very fortunate. I started in a very busy clinical practice. I was already kind of known there because I had trained there. I right away had the unique aspect of walking into a practice where I was busy with hepatobiliary surgery right away. I was doing anywhere from 200 to 300 hepatobiliary operations a year. I was running the fellowship. We were very successful in our research endeavors, ran a couple clinical trials, did a lot of outcomes research, and career kind of really, I think at that point was going very well. I ended up in New York because I had a unique opportunity. Rich Barakat, who when I was at Memorial was the head of GYN oncology, had taken a position running cancer in the Cancer Institute at Northwell Health in New York. And
Yeah.
Rich had kind of cold called me and asked me to look at a job running surgical oncology. And at the time, I'll take a look. And I really believed in the mission of what we were going to do at Northwell, largest healthcare system in the state of New York. 21, now 28 hospitals. The goal was, how do we standardize high quality cancer care across a large geographic footprint in a rapidly expanding healthcare system? And we've done a lot in that regard over the last 6 years. As you probably are well aware, we've really We've standardized high quality cancer care, which I think includes access to clinical trials and many other things. We capture our data, we track our outcomes, we've improved our quality, but then we've also really built an academic component to this health system. And listen, Northwell was built upon kind of high clinical volume surgeons. It didn't always have a big academic focus.
Yep.
System is clearly focused now on academics. They've built a medical school, which I think is one of the best medical schools in the country. But we've built research databases. We have now an agreement with Cold Spring Harbor for translational research. I jointly hire fellows between Cold Spring Harbor and Northwell to run some of our translational projects, and works out very well. They go to Cold Spring Harbor 3 or 4 days a week. They do the basic science. They come to clinic with me 1 or 2 days a week, enroll patients in the trials that we're performing. And it's really been very, very productive. We had a paper at the American Surgical about 5 years ago, looking at pancreatic organoids for pancreatic cancer and predicting out responses to chemotherapy, and so we've really built up a true academic component to the surgical department that I think is really an exciting time for us. So that's how I got to where I am.
So that's a very intensive description of a rapid fire and meteoric career, name dropping multiple multiple individuals, but also multiple significant institutions. And I was talking to a resident yesterday about the culture of academic powerhouses like specifically Hopkins and actually Memorial, where every event in the day is considered to be an educational experience. And it's a culture that has taken 100 years to develop. It doesn't happen overnight. Now, there's lots of stuff that is not necessarily as good as that in such environments. It's seeing as he was a guest on this podcast, Justin Dimmick
Yeah, sure.
said that he was a student in Hopkins and he knew he wanted to do surgery, but to quote him or paraphrase him, he said, "I knew I didn't want to do it in Hopkins," because he found he didn't like the personality culture, if you like, and it works for some people, doesn't work for others. But John Cameron is on record as saying that the Hopkins residency and the Hopkins faculty ladder is there to train the leaders of surgery for America for the future.
Yep.
And I'm pretty sure John Cameron would have viewed that what that means is to create the chairs, the traditional model, the academic centers, as people like Charlie Yeo did, and Henry Pitt, and Keith Lillymo, etc., Tim Pollock. Now you chose a different route, a
Yeah.
slightly different route, because like the system that I was in Florida, and like Northwell, it isn't an academic powerhouse like, and it doesn't have the culture like.
Correct.
So, why you alluded to why you did it, because the offer and you saw the vision, but what have you found to be the biggest challenges
Yeah.
in changing it?
I'll start off by saying, you alluded to it, but I see it as I've been incredibly fortunate to be exposed to honestly many individuals in surgery, kind of some of the surgical giants that I think have impacted my practice, but also my view of leadership in very similar yet different ways. They've all, it's sort of like clinically, I do things Some of the techniques I use I learned from Murray Brennan. Some are the ones I learned from John Cameron. Some are I learned from Keith Lillema. I think that the leadership styles that I've been exposed to by some of those individuals has clearly impacted me in a lot of positive ways that I've just been lucky, to be honest with you. What I think is unique about today is that medicine is changing, but so is the business of medicine and the environment in which we practice. And I think that we're evolving both in terms of our techniques and the therapies that we have and everything else, but also in terms of how's medicine going to be applied in the United States in the future. Listen, medical expenses right now are over 19-20% of the US GDP.
Yeah.
That's not going to go on forever. We can't afford it. So there's so many bigger problems that we're facing right now that I saw the opportunity in coming to New York as being a part of some of the solutions in the future. So first of all, I felt like in my own clinical practice, I could operate on 250 or 300 patients a year, and I was impacting those 250 or 300. But in coming to New York, we at the time were doing over 20,000 cancer operations a year. That's an opportunity to impact 20,000 patients a year. The other thing is I saw that academic centers, in my opinion, are struggling now with balancing, okay, we're an academic institution, but guess what? We still need to be financially solvent.
A
And they're
business.
struggling with that.
Yeah.
I think that Northwell and some of these big healthcare systems are coming at it from a different direction. They're saying, all right, we have a financially solvent enterprise. Now, how can we be academic? And truthfully, this gets philosophical, but I think we're all going to kind of meet in the middle somewhere. I like coming at it from the clinical side and from the financially, better side. And I think that what I've noticed at Northwell is what was most important was the commitment to becoming academic. I think in reality, in the beginning, it's easy to say you want to be academic, but what does that mean? Making people understand the value
Yeah.
of an R01 grant. What does it mean? What does it mean financially? What does it mean nationally?
Yep.
It takes time for people to understand that. When I want to hire a top-notch surgeon that's trained at the big academic places, that's going to be 50% clinical, but I know they're going to get an R01 in 3 to 5 years. How do I make sure that person has the right value assigned to them and people financially understand, hey, listen, for the next 3 years, there's going to be a little bit of a loss, but guess what? In 5 years, we're going to have a good clinical practice and we're going to have an R01 grant. So I find that fun trying to work through some of those problems and some of those issues. I would say those are some of the biggest hurdles you come across.
Yeah.
You have, for instance, our relationship with Cold Spring Harbor is a fantastic one. But the reality is that basic science institutions struggle with understanding the clinical side of things, and the hardcore clinical institutions have trouble understanding with how the basic scientists are coming at this. Can't you just, Matt, can't you just, when you take out the specimen, just like put it in the back of your car and drive it out to Cold Spring Harbor? Like, no, we need to have a biorepository program, and the information needs to be de-identified. And guess what? It costs money to do this. So who's going to pay for it? I find that exciting and that fun working through those problems.
Do you think it's been my experience, was my experience elsewhere, that there was a clear recognition of what the shiny object was, what the target was.
Yeah.
But despite, and I'll be generous and say that everyone's best intentions, the true recognition of the full execution cost was not there.
Yeah.
And whether it's the dollars of backstopping somebody in their first 3 to 5 years, or whether it's the impact on, and it's this issue that Mark Talamini has spoken about before, that if an organization has a mission other than clinical dollar generation, that
mandates a piece of the margin has to be spent on that. And
Yeah,
in this modern world, now you've chosen, and I'm paraphrasing this, so I am deliberately putting words in your mouth, so forgive me for that. But as you say, the ivory tower academic centers are struggling with the balance of academia versus business reality.
correct.
You've chosen to put your eggs in the basket of the business reality strength in the hope that it will develop the academic side of the other place for the reasons that you've
Yeah.
articulated. Um, uh, what makes you think, other than the blatantly obvious, which is the fact that business is business,
Yeah.
that the business can create the culture?
Well, I think that in reality, no margin, no mission.
Yeah,
If you can't fund your enterprise, you're not going to have an enterprise. I mean, that's just life. I hate to say it.
yeah,
And I think that the reality is that things are more aligned than it may seem because everybody wants clinical volume. You want clinical volume, obviously, for the financial side, the business side. But guess what? If you don't have clinical volume, you can't do research. You
yeah,
can't teach. So I see my job, and part of my job is aligning and explaining to people that listen, yes, we want clinical volume, right? We want clinical volume because we need money because no margin, no mission. But we need clinical volume also because if I'm not taking out pancreas tumors and liver tumors, then can't do research. There's no specimens. We can't teach our residents how to do it. So I think there's more alignment than people realize. And I think that the reality is at least my approach has been, I kind of see where I think I want us to be 5, 10 years from now. And I recognize we can't do it tomorrow.
yeah.
We can maybe accept a little bit of a lower margin in the short term with the ultimate goal of getting to where we need to be, which I think in the end we'll have a good margin anyway, as I guess a long way of, because you develop an academic reputation, you develop that lore. Patients are going to come and want to be seen by you more. We see more now out of state patients. I operated on 2 out-of-state patients this week. It's because they're now recognizing that the program's here, that the academics are here. So I think honestly, I feel like we're just at an earlier stage of developing the hard, the heavy academics.
When you took the job, and we'll probably finish on this before going on to other topics. When you took the job, were there people in Hopkins that looked at you sideways and said, "Come on, dude, you should be a proper chair"?
So the before I left Hopkins, I would come back to my office at least once a week with John Cameron sitting in my office saying, "You just can't leave. You can't leave." John's a good friend of mine. I saw him a couple of weeks ago giving, grand rounds down there. That was very hard for me. This is a guy that is a god to me, as a mentor, is now a friend. I had a very special, I think, relationship with John because we went from we had the unique experience of him being my teacher, and he was a hard teacher.
Mm.
I used to say the education was great, but the tuition was very expensive.
Yeah.
Uh, he taught me. He was hard on me. But then I joined faculty and I was like his junior partner. And then later on, we were more friends. So having him come into my office and harass me to stay at Hopkins was probably the most difficult part of my decision to leave. But in the end, I believed in what I was doing. And I've talked to John about it recently, and he understands it. There were people, what are you doing? You're going to be a chair in 2 years. You're going to be a chair in 3 years. The reality was there's never any guarantees in any of this. There's never any guarantee that you're going to become a chair, that you're going to become a chair where you want to become a chair. And then things that we don't talk about a lot, but we should as surgeons, is your family. I never wanted to be the surgeon that, when my kids are in high school, I decide I'm going to pick up and I'm going to move them because I got a chair job in the middle of nowhere
Yeah.
because I want to be a chair. My end goal still is to become a chair. I want to become a chair. I think you can't train at Hopkins and not want to be a chair. but I'm not going to do it at the detriment of my family either. And at the time that I moved, it was probably a good time to move. My kids were at the right age.
Yeah.
I think it was then, or 4 years later, when my kids were in high school, and it might have been a personal problem moving.
So we'll make a note of that then, that we're watching to see what will happen to you in a decade. And so John Cameron can mark it down there. There's still hope for you.
I mean, I think there is. Listen, if you look at, I mean, that you can't train at Hopkins without it being in your DNA that you want to be a chair. I mean, just look in New York. The chair at NYU is a Hopkins person. The chair at Memorial Sloan Kettering is a Hopkins person. You know,
Exactly. No,
that's
exactly
our
right.
goal. Now you see a
So,
lot of people nowadays moving on, and they want to be deans, or I mean,
oh yeah,
for
yeah,
us, being a chair is the ultimate position.
yeah. David Lennon has just become a dean.
I saw that. I
Yeah.
saw it.
So, how would you describe? You mentioned that you were exposed to different styles of leadership, etc. And I think we all know that John Cameron's style was, I think the term we will use just for today, multifaceted, shall we say? How would you describe your leadership style? What are the features?
I mean, I think I'd like to be right in the trenches with the other surgeons. I like them to know that I'm going through the same hardships they are, that I'm experiencing the same things, that I'm a surgeon's surgeon. I think it's important for camaraderie that a leader is thought of as part of the group. I think it's always important that people, I won't say self-deprecating, but maybe self-deprecating. I accept my weaknesses. I'm open about my weaknesses. Um, I was brought up, we had a group at Hopkins that was very willing to call each other for help in the operating room, to not be macho, we were a team, we were working together. And I think we learned that from John Cameron. He would call me into the operating room and ask me, "Oh, what do you think I should do here?" He knew what to do. He could do the operation, but the reality was, I think what he was teaching me was get other people's input, show that you're not perfect, accept your imperfections. And I do that here. I don't want people to think I think I'm perfect, because I'm not. None of us are. I'm part of the team. We all pitch in. So my leadership style, I think, has a lot to do with that, is building a team, making people feel valued. I think in the end, all people are motivated by feeling valued. Now, everyone defines their value differently. Some people define it with finances. Some people define it by notoriety on a national or international level. Some people just want to be told, "Hey, great job today. That was a really good case." I think giving people the feeling of the value that they deserve is very important as a leader. I think doing a lot of listening,
Yeah,
less talking and more listening. I've learned that over the years. Being willing to change how you approach problems, and recognizing that maybe something you thought with 100% certainty was correct actually isn't correct. Being willing to accept change, and keeping an open mind.
there there was a guy who was, I think he was the head of the business school in Hopkins, a guy called Bernie Ferrari, who,
Yeah,
yeah. So
that's where I went to business school.
yeah, so I knew Bernie quite well from Rochester. He was a Rochester graduate,
Yeah.
and then he was, as you know, he went to Arshner, and then he was in McKinsey for years. But he wrote a book, a little red book called Power Listening,
Mhm.
which is exactly. I mean, I think surgeons in general are not great listeners, but he turned it into a book that saying that you should be listening for 80% of the time and speaking for. I don't know any surgeon that is at that ratio, but the point is well made.
I mean, we have, surgeons, sometimes stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason. We are in a field where we have to make decisions, and we have to make decisions and live with them, and we sometimes have to make them somewhat quickly. So we usually don't shy away from being decisive.
Yeah.
But the reality is that a lot of times, and I've learned this the hard way at times, you learn a lot by listening more than you're talking. I've been in situations where maybe you say something at the beginning of a meeting and you don't really understand what everyone else in the meeting has on their mind, and it backfires on you. The reality is when you let other people speak, you learn things, but you also kind of hear like, what's their angle? Why are they really meeting with you today? Someone comes to meet with me. I think they're meeting with me for one reason, but in reality, they're really coming to meet with me for a different reason. And so if you just listen, I mean, it's funny. I've been to a few big meetings with, quote, important people at Northwell, and 90% of the way through the meeting, I haven't said a word. It's not because I don't want to say something. It's because I'm really trying to figure out like what's going on with this meeting. Like, why are we having it? What's their view of this? You know, and that's why I also learned a lot of times with important meetings, set the table before the meeting. Don't have a discussion and an argument in a public manner when so if I have like a really important decision that needs to be made and it's going to be brought out at a meeting, frequently I've already talked to the other people on the meeting ahead of time. So it's kind of orchestrated to some
Yeah,
extent. But
yeah, and it's, I think it's, a lot of those cliched statements, don't ask a question when you don't already know the answer and that type of stuff. I learned a lot from another pancreatic surgeon who was an old friend in the UK called David Carter, who was the chair of surgery in Edinburgh and Glasgow, Sir David Carter as he became. And he was a genius at chairing a meeting and saying nothing and listening to what everybody did and debated and argued and one thing or another. And at the end of the meeting, of course, the answer was evident. And he would suddenly announce that what he thought was the answer. And everybody would sit back and say, wow, that guy's a genius.
yeah,
And of
yeah,
course, he had let everybody else do the work, and
right,
it wasn't because of ego. He just realized it was the right way, and of course, now he had ownership amongst people. So
and building consensus. It's funny when I came to New York, we were starting up a lot of our enhanced recovery pathways, which you guys in colorectal have a very robust ERP pathway. But in HPB for pancreas and liver, we didn't really have that here. Now we didn't have it by name at Hopkins. We just kind of all did it the same way, and we had a pathway we called it. We didn't have a sexy term, enhanced recovery pathway. We just had our pathway. But what I found here in developing it was that the last thing you wanted to do is to go into a meeting and say, okay, here's how the way we're going to do it. Because you had surgeons that have been doing these operations for a long time. It's like, why are we going to do it your way? My way works. So we built, well, first of all, we started capturing our data, but then I got people together and I said, listen, we don't have to do it my way, but here's like a way we can start with, and then tell me what you want to do differently and why. And let's come up with like a common way that we're going to manage these patients post-operatively. And it was very, very successful because I think people didn't feel like it was being pushed on them. They felt like they had been a part of building it. So they, of course, were going to follow the pathway because, like, I helped build it, right? If I'm a surgeon and I built this pathway, I'm much more apt to participate in it.
how did you get them to realize or believe or accept that there was a need to change?
So it was a simple fact of actually showing them data.
Hmm.
So I had a meeting right before this one with my database manager. We now capture all of our pancreas and our liver operations, but mostly I'm talking about pancreas. We capture every pancreas operation done in our health system. And we have a quality database that captures length of stay, mortality, morbidity, complication rates, et cetera. And in the beginning, we meet. We meet about, it's supposed to be quarterly, but it's probably once or twice a year. We meet, we have ahead of the meeting, I send everyone the slides. On their slides, in the first column, it has all the surgeons and their outcomes across it, but they're de-identified.
Right.
So Matt Weiss is there. Matt Weiss is in column A because I want people to see mine. And then it says surgeon A, B, C, D, E, and F. And before the meeting, you're told, guess what? You're surgeon D. You're surgeon F.
Right.
We review it. And then we look at the outcomes. And guess what? You had outliers.
Yeah.
It became very obvious.
Yeah.
You had someone doing a Whipple that had a 24% mortality rate. That's not okay. So showing the raw data. Now you can imagine the first gut reaction of most surgeons when they saw their data was, no, that's not right.
That's wrong.
Right? But
The standard 4 steps of data
yeah.
brief, it's not right. Where did you get that? That's quite interesting. Can we talk?
Right. So we went through it, and now we go through it regularly, and we say, okay, listen, you know who you are, you know where the rest of the group is, you know what the total outcomes are, and then we use it as, here's our pathway. Should we be making changes to the pathway? Is there a new paper that came out? There's a new paper that came out showing that we shouldn't leave drains after distal pancreatectomies. What are we doing as a group? So we use that as a springboard, as a quality improvement project, but it's also a little bit of a check on the surgeons to say, listen, here's your outcomes.
Yeah. So just before we pivot, so we already know that 10 to 15 years from now, Matt Weiss will be somewhere really important and famous. How will healthcare have changed in 10 to 15 years? And I asked that question, having spoken to a good colleague of mine on this podcast, Ara Darzi, who was a health minister in the UK for a while, about the NHS, which the arguments, the debates have lasted for 50 years and the change hasn't happened really. And in the US, where it's different, but similar debates and arguments have happened for 20, 30, 40 years, and it hasn't changed.
Yeah.
The challenges haven't changed, the deficiencies haven't changed, the craziness hasn't changed on both sides of the Atlantic.
Yeah.
How will it have changed in 15 years?
It's a great question. I mean, nobody has a crystal ball, and I don't know. I think to understand kind of the United States kind of culture, people are very worried about losing autonomy and control. There's also, I hate to say this, but there's a belief in a lot of the United States that more expensive things or more expensive care must be better care, which we actually know in medicine is actually completely wrong. And actually, less expensive care is better care.
Yeah.
So you have kind of the way people think that's a little bit contrary to kind of the way medicine is going. We also know that medicine is incredibly expensive in the United States, and it doesn't necessarily pretend better outcomes. In some areas, it's worse. In some areas, it's worse.
A lot of areas.
And I've been saying for quite some time, and I believe this, that if we in medicine don't fix our problems in terms of decreasing the costs of healthcare, then somebody's going to do it for us. And I think we're starting to see that, with bundled payments and, why is it that if I do a Whipple, for instance, and patients in the hospital for 5 or 6 days and the operation costs $20,000, let's say, why is it that you would get paid less than someone that does a Whipple and the patient's in the hospital for 3 months and then has to go to a rehab facility and go to a SNF and they get paid like $100,000?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. Now, how you manage that with risk adjusting and making it so that surgeons only, don't only take on the easy cases and everything else, it's complicated and it's hard. But I think clearly that's where we're moving to.
Value-based purchasing.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it may go a step further. It may get to the point with more in my space in cancer, drugs are really expensive. To spend $200,000 to give someone an extra week and a half of life expectancy, does that make sense? I think the reality is we may get to a point where you get a payment for a diagnosis. Here's pancreas cancer. You have stage 1, 2 pancreas cancer. Here's $100,000. How do you want to spend it? Well, surgery is actually pretty cheap. Chemo is actually pretty expensive. So it's going to force us to be more thoughtful on optimizing our outcomes at a reasonable price. So I think the pressure is going to continue to keep costs under control.
Yeah, and I'll throw into that lot the overwhelming issue of misaligned incentives in the United States. I mean, the highest rate of chemotherapy within the last 7 days of life in the world,
Yes.
and the highest rate of surgery in the last 7 days.
Yeah.
It's insane. So,
Yeah. These are tough problems, though. It's uh,
yeah,
it's hard to know what.
yeah,
There's probably no right answer, but the question is, what answer are we going to come up with? And I'm not sure.
for sure. Okay, so when the lights go out on Friday evening,
Yeah.
what is Matt Weiss gonna do after surgery, or are you uh, are you a irretrievably sad individual who's going to
I
go
mean,
home and study a data sheet?
listen, I'm not going to be one of these surgeons that's operating when he's 80 years old because he doesn't have anything else to do for fun.
So what do you
Uh,
do?
Number one, I'm very active with family life. I have a wonderful wife that I met in Boston. I have three great kids. I have a 15-year-old son. I have 13 and 8-year-old daughters. So I'm very active in their lives. They'll tell you I'm not during the week, but on the weekends I try to partition, and I try to be present in the moment, which I think is important. So I spend time with my family. I do play golf. I love to play golf. I always have. I stopped during training and during fellowship, but then I restarted after. And
Handicap?
what's that handicap?
Yeah.
It's low right now. It's lower than what it should be. I'm usually around a 13 to a 15, but I had the best round of my life 2 weeks ago, and it dropped to 2 points. So I'm down to a 10.9 index right now.
That's worryingly good.
Yeah, I'm not that good though. So it just means you lose money when your handicap's lower than you are. But I'm an avid golfer, but when I say avid, I don't play every week. I play in a lot of charity outings in the summer months. If I play on the weekends, it's taking one or two of my kids over to the course to play 9 holes or 18 holes. So I play golf. I was an avid fisherman, so I didn't talk about this in growing up, but I worked as a deep sea fishing mate for almost 7 summers, and I
Oh,
started off of the Jersey shore working for a couple of charter boats. But then I met people, and I used to fish all up and down the East Coast. So I would go down to Florida, I would go down to Bimini, I would go down to the Bahamas, and deep sea kind of big game sport fishing, tuna, marlin, et
yeah,
cetera.
yeah, yeah.
And I love to do that, but I don't have a boat right now, and I just haven't had the time to do it because it's a full day. But I am an avid fisherman as well.
What's your greatest extravagance?
And greatest extravagance meaning related to fishing or just in life?
Yeah, anything. I mean, you can tell that I've wasted amounts of money from my background
I
over
like
the
that.
years.
I like
But,
that.
but what's your greatest extravagance?
I like to travel.
Okay.
I'm an avid traveler. I like to, actually, I'm headed to Scotland in September. Um, that's a golf trip. So I'm a traveler. Um, I recently, actually, it's not that recently, about a year and a half ago, I bought myself a nice car. I bought myself a Porsche Cayenne that I love.
Okay.
And I drive it every day. And
Yes.
to me, that seems a little crazy to drive a car that's that nice every day. But to me, if you're going to buy it and you got to use it,
Yeah. Exactly.
a long story, but I bought that car about a month after my college roommate had a heart attack and died. And
Uh,
I decided that was my midlife crisis.
exactly. Very, very stereotypical. Very stereotypical.
I figured that was the cheapest midlife crisis I could have. So I bought that car and I said, "What are you saving money for? Just spend a little bit of it." So I bought a Porsche Cayenne, which I love. But really traveling. I mean, my family and I travel a lot. We're probably going to go to Europe next summer. We haven't mapped it out yet, but we will. We're going to Montana skiing this winter. I
Okay.
like to travel.
All right. So you're having a dinner party at home on Friday evening, and you have two spare seats, and you can invite any two people from history, alive or dead. Who are you going to invite?
I'm definitely going to invite Ernest Hemingway because he is and always was my favorite author.
Okay. You
Read all his books.
need to
I
have
read all his short stories.
plenty of booze in stocked.
It would be entertaining for
Yeah.
sure. Because you want someone who's entertaining.
Okay, so Hemingway.
And then would definitely want to be a political figure.
Okay. This could be a pivotal moment in your future career here.
And I don't know, maybe Chamberlain or
Neville Chamberlain?
maybe maybe I don't know. My generation, I don't. I'll make a decision. Ronald Reagan.
Okay. All righty.
He had a pretty wild life, and I
Yeah,
think
he had an
it'd be an
interesting
interesting
life.
conversation
I
piece.
read a biography of his quite recently. Very interesting life for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and I stole a quote from that book recently, where in the early stages of his Alzheimer's, when he was working on his ranch every day, he is alleged, and the guy he said this to said that he said this to him, his two buddies that he worked on. He said, you know, the great thing about this Alzheimer's is that every day I meet new people. I don't know if it's true, but it's a great thing to say if it
Yeah,
was, you
I
know.
like I like that. I'm a pretty avid reader also. I don't get to read for fun a lot during the week and even on the weekends, but certainly any vacation or break. Like last week, I was off and I read a book. I'm always looking for new material to read.
I have a longish commute at the moment, so I listen to audiobooks, and I'm just almost finishing a remarkable biography of Mark Twain.
Uh,
Extraordinary
I
life.
I've had a lot of people recommend that to me, and I keep saying I'm going to try it. I think that's great. I
Well,
think it's
it's only because I'm in the car, you know.
right.
So,
Well, the traffic in New York is terrible. So I only live 20 miles away, but it takes me 45 minutes or an hour to get home too. So,
exactly. So, favorite movie?
uh, I'll give you two just because I share it with my children. I just think the series of Star Wars was just
Okay.
out of this world, and now with the new ones, I share that kind of experience with my kids. I also love Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great movie.
I think a fantastic movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you were not a surgeon, and this is a two-parter because it might be the same answer.
Yeah.
If you were not a surgeon, what would you be? And if you could have one talent that you do not have, what would it be? Maybe it's the same answer, but
I'd be a python hunter in Florida. No, I'm just kidding. I I'd be a fighter pilot. I wanted to be a fighter pilot when I was really little. Kind of gave up on that when my eyesight
I was
started to
going to
go.
say, everybody who wears glasses says,
Yeah,
I would have been a fighter pilot.
I did. I mean, I think when I was a kid, it was be a fighter pilot. I couldn't because my eyes were bad. I wanted to be a professional football player. But
Okay.
as I tell the residents and medical students, even though I really wanted to be a professional football player and I lifted weights and I worked out all the time and I did all the drills, I just didn't have the talent to be a professional football player. So then came surgery. So I
There you go.
became a surgeon.
Can you tell me one virtue every surgeon should have?
I think being having an incredible attention to detail or being meticulous. There's plenty of things in my life that I'm not meticulous about. I wouldn't say I'm like OCD or anything like that, but I think attention to detail every time is what really pays dividends in terms of outcomes, and not settling.
Yeah.
Not accepting when something isn't the way you want it to be in terms of it, especially clinically in the operating room. If it's not right, You can't, if you ever leave the operating room thinking, I should have done this, then you should have done it at the time in the operating room. So I'm kind of, I think being unwavering, having that attention to detail and just not accepting less.
I spent a year as a vascular fellow deliberately because one of the things I realized is that many surgeons say this, but vascular surgeons do not say, that'll do.
Right.
Because for
Right.
them, they're going to be back there that night.
Correct.
You know,
Correct. And
uh,
that, that's hard. I mean, when you do tough operations, there are times, there are times where I'll say, I just know I can't do it any better, but I'm never going to leave unless I've done it the absolute best that I can. And this attention to detail and following up on things, that's the difference between, in my opinion, being good and being great. What's the difference between having a 3% mortality and a 1.4% mortality in your Whipples? It's those little things.
yeah,
It, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I get a report that the CT scan looked fine. There was no pseudoaneurysm, but guess what? I get my fat butt out of bed and I look at the CT and I say, I don't know. I think I do see a pseudoaneurysm there. Let's do an IR angiogram. That's the difference between a 3% and a 1.4% mortality, I think.
yeah, yeah. I agree. Yeah, I agree. And that takes a discipline.
And it's hard,
Yeah,
right? It's hard.
it is.
But
Okay, now,
I learned that early on, that you never leave the hospital without looking at your own x-ray. You
yeah,
never, yeah, I can hear the read, but I look at them all myself. I look at the CTs myself. I finish a case, I look at the CT scan myself after the case because I still learn things.
yeah,
Oh yeah, now this makes sense. Yeah, that artery looked a little funny in the OR, but now I see it, and the next time I don't miss it. So that's just, I tell people I'm a pretty demanding person. I recognize that, and I'm a somewhat impatient person. That's probably my biggest weakness is impatience. But I'm no more demanding of other people than I am of myself. I'm demanding of myself. I'm hard on myself, but that's just the way I'm built.
yeah. We don't have time to jump into that deep end of the pool that asks the question, well, just because you're hard on yourself doesn't mean you have to be hard on me, you know?
Yeah, I know. I used to laugh when I was in the lab at the MGH. I worked in a cardiac transplant lab, which meant I was operating with full-blown cardiac surgeons from the MGH. And in those days, the cardiac surgeons at the MGH were known for,
Sure.
the beatings will
Everywhere.
continue until morale improves.
All heart surgeons.
Yeah, and they were stuck on a Tuesday doing like a heart transplant on a monkey with like a second-year resident from Hopkins that had spent the first 2 years in the ICU. So imagine what it must have been like for them to watch me fumble through like sewing a coronary or sewing a pulmonary artery, and I remember there was one surgeon, I won't say his name in case this ever gets out, but I remember he used to say things like, I just don't understand why it's so hard for you. It would kill me on the inside. But I've thought about it a lot, as you can tell. And what I wanted to say to him
Every day, every day.
never did was, well, if it was that easy for me to do, then I guess you wouldn't be that special then, would you? The reality is with trainees, you can't expect them to be able to do it the way you do. I've done, 16, 1700 Whipples. It's not fair for me to be that demanding on them. But you pick and choose what you're going to be demanding about.
It's as you say, it's something that you remember. I'll give you my golfing story, which is the late Doug Saunders missed an 18-inch putt on the last hole of the British Open in St Andrews,
Yeah.
and to win the tournament, and he had to play a playoff the day after, Jack Nicklaus, which he lost handily.
Yeah.
Many, many years later, somebody said to him, do you think about that moment a lot? And he said, no, 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 no. He said, I mean, some days I can go like an hour without thinking of it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, hardly ever. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. So the final few moments, this does not require nor permit any thinking. These are important questions for which there are no real answers, except some people do know the answers. So you ready?
Sure.
Baseball or football?
Ooh. If I had to choose football, but I love them both.
Mac or PC?
Mac,
Wine or beer?
beer,
Cats or dogs?
dogs. Just got a
What
new dog this week.
what did you get?
Rhodesian Ridgeback.
That's a proper dog. Yeah,
It's our third one.
that's a
He's
proper.
beautiful. Brand new. She's 8 weeks old.
Yeah, you should listen to Ricky Gervais on Rhodesian Ridgebacks.
Okay.
Google it. Google it.
I will. I
It's
will.
hilarious. Mountain or beach?
Beach,
Beatles or Stones?
Stones.
Ooh. Um,
I like them both.
Giants or Jets?
Neither. If Eagles. I bleed green. I guess if I had to choose, I would pick the Jets because at least they're not the Giants.
Remind me the name of the Eagles coach who
Tony Ryan.
no, no, no. Before that, who went? He's in California, has a winery.
Vermeil.
Dick Vermeil. So Dick Vermeil tells the story that when he was offered the job, his first head coaching job, and he called his mentor John Madden,
Mhm.
said to him, is this a good job? And he said, of course it's not a good job, otherwise they wouldn't be offering it to you.
Right. 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 Yeah. I'm Eagles. I bleed green.
Oh yeah, that's now who bleeds green as well. Pancreas surgeon you in I think he's from South Carolina and he's in Cleveland. Blanking.
Jordan Winter, maybe?
No, I'll have to think about it. But he has it's on. You interview him, and it's like the whole background of his office is Eagles.
Yeah. We're on a good stretch right now. So.
Yeah, it's a little sad. So, all right. So,
Yeah.
Matt, listen, thank you so much for spending the best part of your afternoon talking
Yeah.
to me. I really appreciate it. This comes out at some point on YouTube for those who want to watch, and for all the podcast platforms for those who want to listen. But I really appreciate your time and your insights, and it's been a great hour.
John, thanks for asking me to do it. I enjoyed it. It was good talking with you.
Thanks.